So Solomon grew up in the house of a king. As Solomon grew up, he watched his father David be king over this new country, this new kingdom called Israel. In David's time, Israel had gone from being, they called themselves a country, but they were really a collection of villages up in the hills that the more powerful people at the bottom of the hills sort of ignored. They went from that to being a real, genuine country, a real kingdom with all the things you expect for a real country. So that's the environment Solomon grew up in. And as David was dying, they both realized that Solomon would be the king after David's death. So David brings his son in and gives Solomon a list of advice on things he thinks he should do and things he thinks that Solomon should consider as he becomes king. The first advice he gives is to be faithful to Yahweh, the Lord their God. After that, it turns into advice about very specific situations. I thought about reading you a section, but if you haven't read the entire book of 1 Kings, you don't know who any of these people are. But it's advice like, remember this thing that happened with so-and-so? They were violent. Oh man, excuse me. They were violent in peaceful times. Do not let them die a peaceful death. These are the sorts of things that apparently kings say to each other. David dies, and Solomon spends a few weeks working on the issues his father had called attention to. And then, after, the Bible's not very specific, but it seems like it's weeks, maybe a few months, Solomon goes to a place called Gideon and has a dream. The Lord appeared to Solomon at Gibeon in a dream at night. God said, "Ask whatever you wish, and I'll give it to you." Solomon responded, "You showed so much kindness to your servant my father David when he walked before you in truth, righteousness, and with a heart true to you. You've kept this great loyalty and kindness for him and have now given him a son to sit on the throne. And now, Lord my God, you have made me, your servant, king in my father David's place. But I'm young and inexperienced, and I know next to nothing. But I'm here, your servant, in the middle of the people you have chosen, a large population that can't be numbered or counted due to its vast size. Please give your servant a discerning mind in order to govern your people and to distinguish good from evil, because no one is able to govern this important people of yours without your help." It pleased the Lord that Solomon had made this request. God said to him, "Because you have asked for this instead of requesting long life, wealth, or victory over your enemies, asking for discernment so as to acquire good judgment, I will now do just what you said. Look, I hereby give you a wise and understanding mind. There has been no one like you before now, nor will there be anyone like you afterwards. I also give you what you didn't ask for, wealth and fame. There won't be a king like you for as long as you live. And if you walk in my ways and obey my laws and commands, just as your father David did, then I will give you a very long life." Solomon awoke and realized it was a dream. The impressive thing that Solomon does here is he admits he doesn't know very much. It's a strange thing to admit, really. Solomon could have made the opposite argument, really. Solomon could have said, listen, I grew up in the house of a king, I was playing with trains, or probably not trains, I guess, but I was sitting at the feet of a king and listening to his advisors my entire life. Thinking about the way to govern a country is something I've done my entire life. Now, to be fair, I've only been doing it for a few weeks, but I know what I'm doing. He could have said that, and it would have been more or less as true as what he did say. What he did say, though, was the interesting thing. I don't know very much. I think it's hard for people to admit that, but it seems like it should be the most natural thing in the world to admit, right? I don't know. I haven't thought about that very much. I don't know. I don't think I have the information to have an opinion on that. I am surprised by how often I see someone encounter a new idea, and I'll watch people talking, right? And I'll watch them talking, and I'll see one person sharing an idea with the other person, and this other person in some cases, know they've never heard this idea before. And even in those moments where I know they're hearing an idea for the first time, it's crazy rare to hear them say, huh, that's interesting, I guess I should think about that. Instead, what you usually see is by the time the first person has even finished speaking, the second person has a firm opinion. Isn't that weird? How do you have a firm opinion on something that you've been thinking about for like 9 seconds, you know? Why not just admit, I don't know very much about that? On Monday, we talked about the story of Esther. And we talked about a lot of things, but one thing we talked about is Uncle Mordecai's famous words to his niece. He said, Esther, what do you know but that you were born for such a time as this? And I said, I think those words might be true for us today too. What do we know but that we were born for precisely this moment? I kind of said it and then I didn't say much else about it. I didn't tell you specifically what I was talking about. I want to be more specific about that today. There are a lot of issues in our country, but one of the most prominent and probably one of the most serious is systemic racism. It has come to national attention again in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, right? You know. I'm telling you things you already know. Here's what I'm suggesting. Maybe we were born for precisely this moment so that we can be the ones that finally make substantial improvements in systemic racism in the United States. Maybe God has put us here specifically to be those people. If that's true, we're not going to make progress until we can do the same thing Solomon did, until we can admit, you know what? In spite of thinking about racism and knowing some stuff about racism, right? We all know stuff about racism. In spite of that, it's also true that there's a lot that I don't know about racism. If we can do what Solomon did, I think we can start to make real progress. One of the issues that our country has had is that for too long, those people with the power to change things have not been willing to listen to others. And so they have occasionally acted with the best of intentions, but without having listened to the people who really knew what they were talking about first. They didn't do what Solomon did. They didn't say, you know, maybe there's some stuff I don't know. Y'all, I think that is what it's going to take for us to be the people who finally start to make change on this issue. I think it reminds me of like a basic question, like when I want to learn more about an issue, who do I go to? Well, I hope to go to somebody who knows something about that issue, or maybe find a book where somebody who knows something about that issue has written about it, or a blog, or YouTube videos, or Wikipedia, or sometimes a person, right? For example, if you were interested in Buddhism and wanted to learn more about Buddhism, would you go to your pastor and ask their thoughts on Buddhism? Well, no. I mean, if you want to know your pastor's thoughts on Buddhism and why your pastor isn't a Buddhist, that would be a good question to ask your pastor. But if you just want to learn, like, what do Buddhists think, what are the different schools of Buddhism, your pastor is probably not the person to ask. You might get lucky. They might be a Buddhist scholar on the side, but probably not the right person to ask. Instead, you would go to these other sources, Wikipedia, or videos from Buddhists maybe on YouTube, or a blog by a Buddhist, or a book by a Buddhist, or maybe you know a Buddhist and you would go talk to him, right? I think that's the same thing. And I think that highlights a problem that we have this particular week, that we are trying to talk about how to improve systemic racism in the United States, but I'm the person that's talking. So I think I want to admit that I don't really know as much as I should, and I hope you will join me in admitting that maybe you don't know as much as you should about racism and what racism looks like in the United States, so that we can go find those people who have written books or do have helpful blogs, or have great videos on YouTube. Maybe these folks can help us learn the things that we still need to learn so that we can make progress on this issue. I want to show you a video from somebody. We're going to play a video. It's out of a series of videos on YouTube. The series is great. I would encourage you to check it out. I hope today maybe we can talk about other sources and other thinkers that y'all have found helpful in your work to learn more about this issue. But before we do that, I'm going to pray, because we're probably not going to come back to this video after we watch the YouTube video. God, I know that you care very deeply about human dignity. You care very deeply about justice being done in the world. And I know, I know that you know that justice is not done to black and brown people on the regular in my country. I am sorry for that. I'm sorry to you as the one I follow, as the one who calls me to live in a better world. But I want to be faithful to you in joining my black and brown neighbors as they work to fix this problem. I want to learn more about what my role in that needs to be, God. I want to follow the example of Solomon, who asked you for wisdom. And in this moment, I ask you for wisdom for all of us here at Lazy W Camp Connections this summer. God, please guide us into truth and justice. Amen. All right, check out this video.